Dirty Birds, what's up? And welcome to another edition of Falcons Final Whistle presented by Zaxby's. I am your host, Will McFadden. I am sitting in a broadcast booth in Mercedes-Benz Stadium with Terrin Waack and Tori McElhaney, and we are overlooking the cleanup crew here at Mercedes-Benz Stadium because the Falcons just wrapped up their second open practice of training camp. There's a lot to dig into. I felt like it was a really balanced practice. Tori, what were your main takeaways?
Yeah, it was, well, first off, it was just a fun night in general. Yeah. I think that there was this moment that I'm writing about in the camp report that I'm simultaneously doing as we are recording this podcast. But Dave Archer was emceeing the evening, and he at one point was like, I need everybody to get loud for someone we haven't seen in a while. And he did his famous "You Shall Not Pass" radio call that he does for a Grady Jarrett sack. And the Halo board showed Grady on the field. And that to me was like such a cool moment because the crowd, that was maybe the loudest the crowd got the entirety of the practice. And there was a lot of really cool plays and really fun moments that we did get to see. But that moment was, honestly, it kind of felt like the heart of the entire evening. And then, of course, after the practice ended, you got to see fans down on the field, players signing autographs, and to see also, I'll say this, Kirk Cousins in a Falcons uniform in Mercedes-Benz Stadium hitting Drake London down the sideline for like a 45-yard grab. Like there was just a little bit of a different type of energy tonight that I thoroughly enjoyed.
Yeah, it was definitely electric here at times. Terrin, what was your thought?
You could definitely hear fans screaming for Grady Jarrett, so I'm glad you brought that moment up because I could just hear people behind me be like, 97! 97! I was like, oh yeah, we're back.
We are back.
But no, I mean, it was a great atmosphere. I thought I don't want to say it made up for there not being fans in Flowery Branch, but it definitely helped lessen that blow. Like, construction stinks, no one enjoys it, but the facility's going to look pristine once finished. And so I think doing this and then allowing fans to come down onto the field and wait out for not interviews, that's us, autographs was really special.
Yeah.
And it was interactive. I kind of want Dave to narrate all of our practices, actually. That was enjoyable to be like, ooh, thanks.
Arch does such a good job of that.
Yeah,
I was like, who's Dave?
I don't know.
I definitely heard him do the "You Shall Not Pass," but I was up in the press box. You guys were down on the field. It kind of came through in little fits and starts for me. So I was like, is he doing a Lord of the Rings quote? What's happening right now? But I appreciate the context and filling it in for me there. And there's one other, you kind of mentioned Kirk Cousins. Yeah. I don't believe he's ever played at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, right? He was supposed to last year, but he gets hurt right before the Vikings come here to Atlanta. And I believe the only other times were in Minnesota in 2019. So and this is something that I remember Matt Ryan specifically kind of mentioning and talking about when they moved from the Georgia Dome to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, is the importance of kind of getting your like sight lines as a quarterback, knowing, all right, there's the game clock, right? Because that's a key thing that the quarterback has to know, and every stadium's different. So just knowing like, where is the sun coming in from? Where are various like lights in the stadium? Where is the clock? So I think it was a really important, somebody asked about the rookies getting out here and having a run through for them, but I think it was a very important run through for Kirk Cousins. And he kind of like aced this test, I think, with flying colors. I'll let Tori, you start, but like Kirk Cousins continues to just look really, really sharp out here for Atlanta's offense.
Yeah, he really does. And it just goes to show, again, I've said this ad nauseum, but like it just goes to show why you pay him the money that you pay him, because of the accuracy that we are seeing from him day in and day out, practice in, practice out. We literally, I kid you not, had a 15-minute conversation between the three of us before we started recording about what his total, how he ended the night, what his total stat line was through the air. And we kind of went back and forth on a couple things. We think it's anywhere from 18 of 21 to 19 of 21.
Huge range.
Yeah, really nickel and diming this.
Really, like, this is a man who threw 21 passes. I think we can agree on that. And only had maybe 2 or 3 incompletions in the entirety of the afternoon, of the evening. And this is on top of the day that he had out at Secondary High School where he only had 1 or 2 incompletions, one of which was a drop, and one of which was an interception by Troy Anderson, which I still think may have been a sack, but we're giving it to Troy. But I say all this to say, like, there's just a level of efficiency in this offense that you can't miss. And especially having been here for the last few years, since the Matt Ryan years, and feeling like that was a piece of this offense that was missing. Mm-hmm. I don't feel that way right now. And Kirk Cousins does a really good job, I think, too, and we've made mention of this before, where he's hitting a bunch of different guys.
Yep.
He's hitting Tyler Algier on a screen. He's getting Drake London down on the sideline. He's getting Kyle Pitts on a crossing route. Like, there are just so many guys that he has a connection to that it's almost gotten to the point that if there is if there is an incompletion, I'm always like, wait, what?
Yeah.
He didn't catch it, or he underthrew it. And that's the part of it that I can't say we've had in Atlanta for the last couple years.
Right.
And when you talk specifically about the like spreading the ball around, if everybody thinks back to like the 2016 season when Matt Ryan set the NFL record for most different players with a touchdown reception, that is a product of this kind of offense. Mm-hmm. And I think that is going to be something that is refreshing. You know, not to say that like Michael Pruitt wasn't catching touchdown passes and people, I don't think we're necessarily expecting that from him, but this is going to be an offense where you see John Fitzpatrick catch a touchdown pass, you know, maybe Charlie Warner catch a touchdown, like guys who aren't Kyle Pitts or Drake London. And it's because I think Kirk is really spreading the ball around.
He's sharing the love. And something, I know we talked about it, or even Raheem Morris talked about it earlier this week, like that collective hold your breath moment when Kirk does get hit.
Oh, gosh, that happens. That happened tonight.
He did.
It happened
he went
tonight.
down.
But
Terrin's been waiting for that moment,
I don't want him to keep getting hit. But like, the more he gets hit, the less worried I am about that injury, because that's been my biggest question mark is how is he going to be full speed, full participation when the season comes? Because that's not a casual injury to come back from. I mean, it's not what Grady Jarrett went through, but still.
I would argue it's equally as awful.
Yeah. An injury is bad nonetheless. Yeah. But something that stood out to me after, I think they were punting, but Kirk was off to the side on his own working with a trainer and doing like agilities and like doing footwork around cones and whatnot. Like, even though there's maybe 10 minutes left of practice and like he's still doing it and just watching him operate as if there's not a care in the world. Like, he's just doing it to do it and can do it as if he was 100% healthy all along.
Yeah. Backpedaling with the the rubber bands.
The rubber band, yeah. And it's just, he's not worried. And that's what you want. Well, everyone else might be. He's not.
That's where I keep coming back, though, to your story, your excellent story about Grady Jarrett and kind of what he said at the end of minicamp and just his return, and talking about how he felt like 2 months before he knew that kind of camp was going to start. And it's like, if I'm already feeling comfortable now, then imagine where I will be in 2 months, and it's going to be that much better. And that's kind of what I keep thinking about with Kirk, where it's like, he's doing all of this stuff right now. We're still kind of like a month away from the season starting.
Right.
So like, imagine where he will be in a month. And that's just really exciting, again, considering the fact that we are quibbling over whether he missed 2 or 3 passes today. And the reason that's important is because it would be important to Kirk. He would be sitting here like tooth and nail being like, no, I didn't have that incompletion. Are you kidding me? Because this dude, we've talked about it, the simmering like rage underneath the surface. He demands perfection of himself. And something that I also noticed from him today that I love, and that is what I think a veteran quarterback gives you, is the willingness to take the check down and to do it in the rhythm of the offense. It's not waiting until the play has been exhausted and then being like, where's my guy? Because by that time, the defense has already identified the check down person and usually have rallied to like cut that off as well. So there were multiple moments today where I clocked, it's like Drake was the first read. He was double covered because the linebacker dropped back and the safety came down. And without missing a beat, just was like, boom, boom. Here's my check down guy. Let's get 6 yards on this play. 2nd and 4. Let's keep it rolling. And if anybody was listening to Believe in Falcons last year, first off, thank you. Thank you for following and listening to our great podcast now. But I was just asking Desmond Ridder kind of week 1, week 2, week 3, just take the easy thing. What the defense is giving you, right? If it's not there down the field, go to Bijan, go to Tyler Algier, like find your dump off weapon, get him the ball quickly in space, and let him go to work. That's totally fine. And that is what I love seeing from Kirk tonight and frankly throughout training camp.
It's live to fight another down.
Exactly.
That's exactly what it is. And it's, you know, sometimes don't make something too complicated when it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
And, you know, there are going to be times where you're going to be able to air the ball out. And we saw the very last play that Kirk Cousins, he was trying to go deep to Darnell Mooney, and it fell short. Again, one of the 2 and or 3 incompletions that he threw.
One of which was a 45-yard deep shot in the kind of double. Right. So
immediately after hitting Drake London down the sideline for 45 yards, give or take. So, it's all relative. But I think you cannot talk about this practice tonight without talking about how good Kirk Cousins was.
Yeah. But again, it was kind of a balanced practice, it felt like, because there were some big plays, I thought, from the defense. Terrin, was there anybody on that side of the ball that really kind of stood out to you?
Ooh, good question. Oh, J.D. Bertrand.
Yeah.
His name was said a lot, and he was like back there with Michael Penix Jr. a few times when it came to that came out weird, a few times where you would have thought it would have been a sack and whatnot. So that's a rookie who is really stepping up early on into camp.
I gave him a sack in the, I want to say the 2-minute drill.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they gave it to him or not, but
I had him for 2.
I had him for a sack there, and then I had him for a sack later.
Yep.
And I thought they had him in this blitz package, especially in that 2-minute, that I thought was really well orchestrated, and how they were, how they used him and how they got him free, essentially. To kind of it was one of those things where he kind of snuck up, I think, on Michael Penix Jr. And it was a well-constructed blitz, if you will. Someone else who I think we're not talking about a lot, but we maybe need to, is Eddie Goldman. Eddie Goldman.
He was with the ones again.
He has ever since the pads have come on, I've noticed him more and more getting in there in that first team rotation. Him along with Damone Harris.
Yeah, I noticed him in there too.
Damone is getting in there quite a bit as well. I know we've been talking a lot about, Braylon Trice and the opportunities that he's been getting, and I'll get to him in a moment. But those two, Eddie Goldman and Damone Harris, I believe that Eddie Goldman will make this 53-man roster without question because of the nature of how they've been using him and also his history and his experience, even though he's taken 2 years off.
I was going to say, you say his history. I agree. I think he will if he's still here. Right?
Yes, and he has a history with Jay Rodgers. That's what I meant by that. They both were with the Bears together.
Right. And I think that's a big reason why he feels very comfortable being here, and Jay is excited to have Eddie back.
Yeah. And then Damone's kind of this sleeper. I know we talked about James Smith-Williams a lot. I would also take Damone Harris as this kind of sleeper almost, where the more and more that time goes on, the more I feel like I see him in the rotation, in certain packages, in certain looks. So he's someone to keep an eye on now. Is
defensive line the leader in the clubhouse right now for the first preseason game against Miami? Is that the group that you're going to be all 4 quarters, I'm keeping an eye on the D-line?
100%. I mean, every single time, second year high school, and then again here at Mercedes-Benz, I went over and watched the defensive tackles specifically during their indie work because they're the one group that I feel like there are a lot of moving pieces, and the way this rotation works out in the next probably few weeks, to me, is going to be indicative of how things shape out once we do get to a 53-man cut down. So, yes, to answer your question, absolutely, as well as outside linebackers, which I will get into with Braylon Trice. Braylon Trice, the more and more downs, the more and more practices, the more and more we're seeing him. And I'll be honest, and maybe it's just me, but to me, we're seeing more and more Braylon Trice, maybe a little less and less of Arnold Ebiketie.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And I'm saying this just from my own viewpoint. I don't have the snap counts. I don't have the reasoning behind that.
It's just observations.
True. It's just a simple observation that I feel like we're seeing a lot more of Braylon Trice than we are Arnold Ebiketie, and that is something to monitor over the course of this preseason.
I would absolutely back you up on that.
Going back to what you were talking about with the D linemen, I know what stood out to me during Raheem's press conference before practice is him saying that they'll probably be heavier in that unit. They'll probably keep more than maybe they have in the past just because there are so many good, strong options. So that'll be interesting to see and maybe compare how many D linemen they've kept previously and how many they do this year. Because they got lines on lines on lines options.
Lines on lines. I'm curious to see, too, and I know we've talked about this, and I even asked Terrin to talk to Zach Harrison while I was in writing the camp report, but he's someone who has put on quite a bit of weight.
20 pounds.
20 pounds, and because they want him in that interior.
Yeah.
He is a huge body. Like I know I've made mention of this on the podcast before and I've written about it, but when you're with this defensive line and you see kind of the varying body types and different styles, Zach Harrison is someone who you look at this group and he towers over the group. He is huge. So I'm so curious to see how his role honestly solidifies, because I really don't have like a lot of like role clarity in what he could be in this offense, and it's something that I'm looking forward to seeing.
Yeah. We're about to start a role clarity drinking game on this podcast. I think every single time.
As long as you're not in the car.
Role clarity. Yeah, as long as you're not in the car. Go ahead and take a sip of the water if you're in the car. But there was one other thing, though, and it was Josh Kendall at the press conference beforehand asked about, like, what are the challenges when you're making that 53-man roster cutdown with such a deep group that does feel really interchangeable and versatile. And Raheem's answer, I think, was very telling. And it was just kind of like, dude, are you sitting in our meeting room? Mm-hmm. Because it's clear that's the conversation that they're having. This coaching staff, they're throwing a lot of different packages, a lot of different personnel groupings. I don't know if y'all noticed, like Clark Phillips was out there running with kind of the ones in AJ Terrell's spot.
Yeah.
So it was like they're getting funky with kind of like who they're throwing out there.
DeMarco Hellams was in a couple of times
with Richie Grant.
without JB3 in there. Like they're doing a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. And something else that was really interesting, and I made note of this in the camp report as well. Did y'all notice that Storm Norton was in there for Jake Matthews during the 2-minute drill with the ones?
Ooh.
No,
yeah,
I didn't.
He was.
I would have grabbed him after practice.
I was.
He was available.
Huh? Did no one talk to Storm?
No, there was a crowd.
There was a crowd. We were elsewhere.
Okay, good. But yeah, no, he was, and that was something that I found super interesting. It wasn't that anything was going on with Jake. I truly 100% believe that it's them having to work, or
it's contingency plans,
right? It's
options.
It's them kind of simulating this stressful 2-minute drill where you don't have Jake
lost
Matthews,
your left tackle,
your longtime left tackle. You can't have him out on the field. Storm Norton, get in there.
Yep.
Here comes the storm.
Here comes the storm.
Yeah.
And I really do. I think that's exactly what they were running.
As soon as you have it figured out, they change it.
And that's a question for him in Miami, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's something I almost asked him today after seeing Storm Norton and Ryan Newsel like getting some rep with the first team line. It's when you have continuity coming back and your 5 starters are returning and they've got a year together, that affords you the opportunity to use some of these really valuable reps to bolster your depth and to get cohesion with guys who aren't normally in the lineup. So I think that's really good coaching. I think it's really good recognition of the strengths and weaknesses of your roster, similar with kind of like defensive line. And we've got a lot of bodies there, inside linebacker. Like it's really cool to see how they're approaching the talent that they have at their disposal. But let's talk about some of that other talent. Like Younghoe Koo had an awesome day today. We've talked a little bit about Drake London, but probably not enough. Terrin, was there anybody that really kind of like stood out to you that's been maybe on the periphery of the guys that we've been talking about for most of camp?
I'm glad you brought up Younghoe because there was one moment with Raheem that just kind of made my entire night. Like it stood out so much. It was Younghoe, I think it was his first field goal attempt. And Raheem was like, timeout, blow the whistle.
Oh, yeah.
And they're like joking, like trying to ice the kicker and whatnot. But they're just running back and forth around Younghoe to distract him a bit. And he still made it, of course. Like,
that was a 53-yarder, too, because that was the second one.
Okay, second.
Yeah,
it was the second on this side.
2-minute drill.
Yeah, it was the Michael Penix 2-minute drill. I thought Younghoe was...
Younghoe was Younghoe. He killed it.
He was, and the fans, I mean, if Grady Jarrett got the biggest cheer, I feel like Younghoe coming out in those 2-minute drills got the second biggest cheer.
For sure.
He was good. I mean, he
doinked one ball.
Okay, he doinked one.
He doinked one, but it was like a 50-yarder.
Did it doink in or doink out?
It hit the right upright and kicked back straight out. But he hit a 57-yarder. which is, I believe, his long in Mercedes-Benz Stadium is 54 in a game. So he hit a 57-yarder today.
That's crazy.
That's all I need to see.
Yeah.
Pack that man up. Like, give him 3 weeks off.
Yeah. Give him 3 weeks off.
Honestly, Youngway this is the only time that you can really like simulate that type of environment, you know, with a game-winning quote-unquote field goal. And he was exactly like what you would think he would be.
Consistent. He is the epitome of consistency.
What did we see from the run game today? Because we just talked a little bit about like the beefing up of the defensive line. And before practice, I was kind of sharing with y'all my belief that is going to be part of the philosophy of this defense, is that you have these big beefy bodies to kind of like defend the run with your like girth and your personnel. And then that allows you on the back end to really focus on the pass. And yet I saw several like pretty good runs from both the first team and the second team offense against the first team defense. Is that concern for the defense, or is that more like, hey, you're going against an offensive line that we just talked about gelling against running backs that are really good in this league? Like, where are you at on that, Tori?
I give a pass to this defense when it comes to defending the run, because the best way to defend the run is to go all out with it. And you can't go all out with it. You can't tackle. Like, Bijan running kind of along with, let's just say, Caleb McGarry and Chris Lindstrom, and you have Caden Ellis, he's not throwing himself against that brick wall like he would on a Sunday. Yeah, same thing with Grady, same thing with David Onyemata. Like, to me, I have a hard time passing judgment on the defense and how they look in practice in training camp defending the run because of that.
Right.
You're not going to have them going full send.
So long runs are more a byproduct of it being camp than any concern.
They ping pong around.
I don't have
anything.
I don't have any concern at this point. Like, I thought,
ask again in a week.
Yeah, I mean, if they go out in this, second team defense cannot stop Miami from running the ball, then that's cause for concern. But I think just by nature of the way that practice is run, I'm not concerned about it.
We've seen a lot of Carlos Washington.
And you're going to continue to see a lot of Carlos Washington.
I think he is right. Like, the battle between he and Jace McClellan is going to be really interesting because, obviously Jace being a draft pick, I think a lot of people had him kind of early on penciled in as that third running back. And Carlos Washington has made it a competition. Like, he's looked good. I think I was talking with Dave Archer at one practice, and he was like, man, 28 just like looks like an NFL running back. Like, he just is built well. He's like proportionate. He's compact. He carries the ball. He's smooth. Like,
you were just saying that you were mixing him up with
with Avery Williams and Tyler Algier, because I'm like, they just all look the same.
It's interesting because Carlos Washington is someone who is very, very loved in this locker room. And I'm not just talking about, Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson really, really like him, but Michael Petrie always, always, always makes a point. If he's talking about his room and, everybody's going to be like Bijan and Tyler, he always makes a point of saying, and Carlos too. Kirk Cousins did the exact same thing when we talked to him this week, when he's talking about the run game and he's talking about jiving with guys, and he made a comment about, I really like Carlos Washington too, in the way that he plays and the way he attacks the game. Like, when people say this stuff, it's important to listen. And I think you cannot overlook what Carlos Washington has meant to the locker room and the coaching staff. They really, really like him.
I'm kind of thinking ahead, and I almost feel like our last podcast before the first preseason game, we each need to come in with, like, for each quarter, here's two guys that we're going to, because like somebody like Carlos Washington, I would expect to play a lot. So you could easily put him in like the second quarter or the fourth quarter, but just some of these guys, Damona Harris, guys who we have been watching that we feel like will get some of these runs
Bradley
and just provide a name for the fan base to be like, hey, first half, watch this, but then, second half, third quarter, fourth quarter, like, here are two guys that really lock in on, because that's what we'll be doing. So I think that'll be a good way to talk about guys like Carlos Washington, talk about guys like Bradley and I. I also want to quickly touch on the tight ends before we get out of here, because I look at this room, almost you could make a comparison to the running back room, right? Where you're like Bijan, Kyle Pitts, those are your guys. I don't know if there's a Tyler Algier in the mix.
Right.
But
No,
when
I
you
don't
look
think
at
so.
Fitzpatrick, Warner, and Dwelly, they're all like right there to me, and they're all pretty similar, and they can do some of the same things. And Dwelly's come along, but I've been really impressed with the other two as well. So, like, Tori, is this a good problem to have for the Falcons?
Yeah, I mean, it's like inside linebackers, it's like running backs. I feel like you can never have too many good players who. And the point that you make about when it comes to Ross Dwelly, Charlie Warner, and John Fitzpatrick, they do have similar tendencies in what their strengths are.
Yeah.
They're inline blockers. Like that is something they are here to help out in the run game. But you saw today a connection with Ross Dwelly and Michael Penix Jr. specifically that showed up on a couple of occasions that I think people kind of forget, because Charlie Warner and Ross Dwelly come from the 49er system. They maybe have had a few catches in their career in Kyle Shanahan's offense. That doesn't mean they don't have the capabilities to be pass catchers. It's just like they were prioritized in a different way. So I'm really curious to see kind of what shakes out with that group. And I do think that they'll end up keeping 4 tight ends. I know I always joked the last 3 years that like anytime with an Arthur Smith offense, you always take like 5 tight ends plus 1 because he
Dog, they would have drafted Brock Bowers this year.
Like,
swear.
There were just so many tight ends everywhere over the last 3 years. But I think for me, those 4 are. I think that Kyle is kind of one of one.
Yeah.
He's Kyle Pitts, and you use him in a very different way. But those 3 have almost become kind of interchangeable.
They really
for
have.
me, and I think that's almost a tip of your cap to John Fitzpatrick, who, I'll be honest, at the beginning of training camp was running with the 3s.
Yeah.
And we've seen him, I think, move up this depth chart. Not even the depth chart, but we've seen him get more opportunities with the second team, I think, here recently.
I think they're all moving up, those 3. The 3 Musketeers, they're like each nibbling their way into the formation. That was too much, I know. But Dwelly's name was brought up multiple times on Tuesday and Wednesday. He had a bunch of catches. And I asked Warner about him afterward, and he's like, he's a really good all-around tight end. Like, I am not surprised. I've been seeing this for the past 3-4 years. Like, he has really good hands. So maybe Dwelly does take a step up in the passing game rather than just blocking.
All right, let's wrap up tonight's podcast with our camp champ. Terrin, let's go to you first. Who stood out tonight?
Younghoe Koo.
Yes, he did for that 57-yard field goal. Give the kicker some love. I love it. Tori, who you got?
I have Kirk Cousins. He was so good tonight, and I did have an honorable mention as Younghoe Koo. We have a Google Doc, and we write down who our camp champ nominations are, and I would like to go on the record that I had Kirk Cousins, Will had Younghoe Koo, and Terrin
didn't even look at it.
She did not write anything down, so she's taking both of ours.
Do we have to redo this again?
I would like to go on the record and say it's a bad idea to put the camp champ thing in the doc, and I'm going to remove that section so that none of us knows who anybody has anymore moving forward.
Okay.
I honestly didn't get down to that part, so.
Honestly, I think we can all agree, though. Kirk Cousins.
I was gonna ultimately fall on Kirk.
Yeah.
Even though, Younghoe Koo deserves a shout out. I think Drake London deserves a shout out. JD Bertrand probably deserves a shout out. But Kirk, again, like, it's just time. It's just time that we give it to him because he's been the most consistent piece of every single practice so far. I can't believe we're 8 practices in and this man has not gotten camp champ yet. So it's past time.
It is time. The time is nigh. And I truly think that when it comes to Kirk Cousins, we haven't given it to him because we've just been so enamored by the people who are around him.
Yeah. And that's
what a good quarterback does.
Yeah.
That is the perfect, I think, encapsulation of what the hope is for Atlanta's offense, is that the quarterback almost becomes an afterthought early in the season because we're so excited to let these shiny sports cars out of the garage and like take them for test drives. That's been a little bit of what training camp has felt like, where because it's a home run derby pitcher who's just putting the ball down the strike zone every single time. You're more focused on the person knocking the ball out of the park than the pitcher. And that's exactly what the offense should be. Mm-hmm. And that's why you bring Kirk Cousins here. Sure, people talk about Kirk Cousins and debate whether he's great or elite or whatever, but you can absolutely win in this league without Aaron Rodgers, without Patrick Mahomes. If you have a quarterback that gets the ball out on time, gets the ball out accurately, and you have a great support system and a cast of talent around them, that is such a recipe for success. We saw the Rams win a Super Bowl with that type of offense, and I really think that they can do it here in Atlanta.
There's something to be said about just not messing up.
Yeah.
There's something to be said about just getting the ball into the hands of your playmakers.
Yep.
It's also so fitting that he's getting it with his first time in Mercedes-Benz.
Yes, I love that. Yeah.
Little cherry on top of the camp champ.
There's a little bit of, what's the word? Poetry.
Nostalgia?
No, not nostalgia.
Serendipity?
Serendipity, maybe. I was saying
Sweet nothings.
No, not that either. I don't think.
So congratulations to Kirkland's signature Cousins for winning the camp champ of practice number 8. We are going to wrap things up there and head on home for some much needed R&R after a long day of covering the Atlanta Falcons. But thank you guys so much for listening to Falcons Final Whistle presented by Zaxby's. For Terrin, Waack, Tori, McElhaney, I'm Will McFadden. We will see you guys on Tuesday because Saturday, Sunday, we're off. Monday, there is a practice, but we are going to be in transit down to Miami. So you guys will hear from us on Tuesday after a joint practice with the Dolphins. Get excited. Woo! It's almost here. Can't wait. We will see you guys then.